Hey team, Jeremy Hauser here, host of the Advisor Mentorship Podcast. You will not want to miss out on this conversation with Ashley Quamme, a former therapist with couple therapy. It was a great, insightful conversation. We talk all things around emotions, having conversations with clients and family members around financial planning, what her team does for financial offices to help get customers not only more engaged, but also help build trust and credibility. We share a little insight also for the virtual advisors, how they come at the appointment process with a disadvantage, not being able to see the customer's full body. But Ashley does share a couple of tips for you and to get those customers to actually engage with you. So with that, kick into the episode. Enjoy.
Systems work, people fail. Welcome to InsureMark's Advisor Mentorship Podcast with Vice President Jeremy Hauser.
Welcome to this week's episode of the Advisor Mentorship Podcast. I'm your host, Jeremy Hauser. And as we just came off episode 87 of the Advisor Mentorship Podcast, talking all things sales, mastering sales, well, we wanted to bring something to you here to elaborate on that. And why not bring in some therapy, bring in some emotional side of the conversation, and also best practices around how some advisors are getting a little more emotional in the conversation with their customers in order to help them with financial conversations when it comes to them and their spouse. So with that, I actually brought on an expert here. She is the founder of Beyond the Plan, Ashley Quamme. How are we doing today, Ashley?
Hey, I'm good, Jeremy. How are you?
Doing good. Appreciate you jumping on for us here for today's conversation. And for the listener, if you don't mind, I know you have a therapist background. You want to share a little bit about that and also what you're doing today and a little bit about Beyond the Plan?
Yeah, absolutely. So the easiest way I think to explain it is that I am a therapist turned financial behavior specialist. And I went from working in mental health to now what I call the dark side, jokingly, financial services. I say the dark side. My husband, he's a CFP. So I don't know. I feel like maybe that gives me a little bit of license to kind of make that joke. Maybe it doesn't. Your listeners can probably chime in and tell me. But for 10 plus years, I practiced as a marriage and family therapist, had my own private practice where I specialized in working with couples, working with families. Naturally, money shows up in those conversations. So, following kind of the breadcrumb trail of curiosity, interest, and really my own well-being led me to working in financial services. And now presently, I own a company, Beyond the Plan, where we are at the heart of or the intersection of financial planning and financial psychology. And so we are your implementation specialists when it comes to how to go about navigating this really complex, seemingly complex topic of financial psychology. How do we go about helping not only the advisors or the practitioner side, but also working with clients as well?
A lot. And I know a lot of advisors probably perked up hearing about not only your experience, but I mean, for the therapist side of things, so is it mainly couples or what all were you doing when you were in private practice?
Yeah, it was primarily couples, working with couples who are usually kind of in that age range, 35 to 50. So typically they have kids, they have families, they're in the heart of living, careers, family, all of that. But also working with families too. So multi-generations, adult kids and their parents, wide range of topic and issues there. But, if I had to hone in on really kind of what was at the heart of it, a lot of it was communication. And a fair amount of it was also money as well.
Yeah, so money and communication, and I'm so just curious because your husband's in the financial space, or what got you to want to endeavor on this journey into the financial sector from being a therapist?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it probably starts long before I met my husband. My dad, he's a CPA. My birthday is April 15th. So it kind of feels like the stars were written for me, Jeremy. Like,
That's pretty good.
I should have seen it coming all along. But jokes aside, Clayton and I, we met in college. I knew I wanted to study psychology, therapy. He knew he wanted to go into financial planning. You can imagine the dinner table conversations that a couples therapist and a financial planner probably have. I'd say our poor kids, um, they'll probably need therapy themselves one day. And we already have that budgeted, that line item budgeted for them as a result of Clayton and I having, as parents. But, some of the interest really kind of lied in what I was seeing in my clinical practice. So, money showing up, communication, um, deeper rooted elements there, psychological elements, not having the tools to know how to navigate that. Believe it or not, they do not teach therapists, at least, a long time ago, they were not teaching therapists how to navigate financial challenges from a relational standpoint, communication standpoint. Clayton didn't know how to handle those because they don't teach financial advisors how to, have conversations, communication, psychology. They don't teach them that. And one conversation idea just kind of led to another. And I found financial therapy. I found financial psychology and just kept going in that vein to where ultimately I saw a gap and a need in financial services around training, education, support, and got the crazy idea of what would it look like if a therapist could work inside of an advisory practice. And there were a few other crazy people out there that said, hey, that's a great idea. We'd love to bring you in and start working on what that model could look like. So it's been a journey, not where I saw myself, but I've really enjoyed it and thrilled to see that some of it is starting to take off in the financial services industry.
In today's world, how do you, as a financial professional, attract high net worth clients in today's very competitive marketplace while separating yourself and your brand from competitors? An authority positioning portfolio is the ultimate solution designed to build trust and credibility while selling for you so you don't have to. This done for you approach from the number one authority positioning coach, Mike Saunders, transforms advisors into celebrity experts through podcasts and TV interviews and guarantees press coverage on ABC, CBS, NBC, and Fox News affiliates. For more information, visit www.authoritypositioningcoach.com/InsureMark. Make sure to reference this podcast AMP in order to get the discount. Once again, that website for this opportunity is www.authoritypositioningcoach.com/InsureMark. Yeah, I think one thing that, regardless of what industry you're in, especially in social media world, as we live in this day and age, it seems like mental health issues, financial decisions, and just communication, as you talked about earlier, seem to be some pretty trending topics, I guess you can say, for what people are always hungry to learn more about. The emotional side of it, especially, I think one of the books I'm actually listening to right now, can't even remember the title off the top of my head, but it talks about the emotional side of the brain and then the thinking side of the brain, and which one basically has the overruling effect of making it a decision for the individual themselves. So how important is language when, not just throughout your experience in therapy, but how important is language when it comes to sales?
Yeah, when it comes to sales, really anything, any relationship, uh, language is incredibly powerful and meaningful, and not to create a sense of overwhelm, but the things that we say, they hold deeper meaning than sometimes what we realize. The words, I'm glad that you kind of brought up some of the brain aspect, and not to get too nerdy
No, go ahead. That's
into
fine.
things, but at least as it relates, as it relates to language, uh, w- what we have to be mindful and aware of is that the words that we choose, the words that come out of our mouth, I should say, they can activate within a client, within a customer. They can either activate the brain's threat response, or it can create a sense of safety and partnership and collaboration. And so I would imagine that for most of your listeners, for most of us, right, in any relationship, we do not want to be activating a threat response. For the most part, probably, right? We want to be creating a sense of safety. And so the words that we choose and using collaborative language rather than maybe authoritative language. So an example of that might be, hey, let's explore this together versus you should do this. The let's explore this together is a collaborative approach. It communicates and it signals collaboration versus you should do this creates more of that threat response. And for some, it may activate even some early childhood, parental, hey, you need to do this. You should do this. And depending upon personality type, we have a different response for that. But the collaborative approach is going to be what establishes that psychological foundation that is necessary from at least a language standpoint for clients or customers to be able to let that guard down and allow you in and to explore, what kind of change or meaningful impact needs to be had.
So like for the listener who may have listened to episode 87, the previous one, we had our sales coach on who's been working with our company for multiple decades now. And one of the phrases that they use in their training with Aslan is called drop the rope. So it's a phrase in reference to asking for permission. Like what you were talking about here earlier is you don't want to meet the person that you're speaking to. And if they're at a high volume, maybe for a couple, if they're coming at a situation very, very angrily or being very angry and aggressive, you don't want to go meet them right there because then basically you're never going to get to the resolving solution. So the phrase of like drop the rope is asking for permission, but also going about it a different way. So for the advisor that's maybe listening in, is there financial, the mindset of a consumer having to make financial decisions, very complicated. And they've probably had past experiences that are not good, or they're currently with other advisors. So in your experience working with financial advisors, how are they able to gain trust with that consumer and going about it to where that consumer is actually very open-minded to having conversations around financial planning and also bringing their spouse into it as well too? So what are some of the, I guess, habits or tricks that you've, not tricks, but things that you've seen a consumer or an advisor use to help build trust credibility faster?
Yeah, the language that I mentioned earlier, using a collaborative language or the drop the rope, right? Inviting them into the conversation and asking about willingness. Are they willing? Is an invitation. And so I think that is a big part of it, the words that you use and creating that psychological safety there. But there's another part of language that is also really important, and that is the language that we don't hear, but the language that we see, right? Thinking about body language, what are we observing? And I find that when advisors can, one, just learn about that, learn how to spot signs, cues there that might indicate what direction they need to take, when they can learn those skills and those cues and then know how to respond to them, it undoubtedly creates just a deeper sense of trust. So let me give you an example.
Mm-hmm.
If you are my client, and please, for this example purpose, please don't be a difficult client. But if you are a client and, I am noticing, or you're sitting here telling me just about some of the current struggles, right, that you're having, and you're looking kind of down, right, and away, like off to the side, that is a clue. That's an indication that in that moment, that client could be emotionally a little more overwhelmed. They could be stressed out, but they're not attuning to you in a way where I'll just maybe call it the logic center, right, of that brain is really primarily activated and engaged with you. So they might be hearing you, but they're really like not taking it all in. And so if you're just laying on strategies, if you're just giving advice and like directives and they're looking down and away, guess what? They're really not going to be capturing everything. And you inadvertently, right, come across as not paying attention and likely maybe not even caring. So, if you, Jeremy, if that's the case for you,
Mhm.
right, what I would want to do is then to be able to say, hey, Jeremy, I know that we're talking about, this insurance policy here. And, for some clients, that might be some pretty heavy stuff. And I couldn't help but just notice, here a second ago that you seem to be looking, kind of off to the side there. And I just want to check in real quick, like, how you hanging, man? Like, how you doing? Is any of this like resonating with you? Am I moving too quickly? Is there something completely else like on your mind right now in this moment? Would it be okay? Could I just pause and check in with you? That
Mhm.
is a huge shift just from a conversation place in terms of gathering information, but it's also from a place of meaning as a client. I mean, I don't know, Jeremy, how would you feel if an advisor noticed that about you and then took that time to pause and ask you that? What would that be like for you?
Right. I mean, it basically shows the other centeredness. So it's making the conversation about them as opposed to basically getting them re-engaged. So I mean, that's because at the end of the day, I mean, as an advisor who's trying to be as efficient as possible through his process, if they're not with you, then you're both just wasting time. So I think that's great advice.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Thanks for being a great client.
Of course, yeah. So I think actually, so I was on your page here, and I saw something in the financial world. Maybe FBO stands for something else of what we put on checks, but for you, it actually stands for Financial Behavior Officer. So what is that?
Yeah, I am your partner. I am your guide for being able to understand why your clients think, feel, and do the ways and things that they do. So, what does that really like actually mean? It means that I come in and partner with you with your firm and offer that subject matter expertise, if you will, if you want to call it that, around financial psychology, around communication, around financial decision making, all of the human stuff right there.
Mhm.
And it is both a client facing role and an advisor facing role as well. And so I meet with clients, I also meet with advisors and teams. And we look at all of the behind the scenes stuff as well as what our clients actually experiencing from a touch point place.
So that's great. So if you go back to also the fact of what you were doing prior to jumping into this new company and starting it up and working with advisory firms, so purely on like mental health, what would be maybe from like your top office or top two offices, something that traditionally you would come across, and like what are these advisory firms coming across in conversations with their prospects that some of the advisors may relate to, and how are you able to help them with those problems?
Yeah, communication skills is probably one of the biggest, but also having a framework for making decisions. And so, in my therapy practice, those were two big ones. How do we, navigate being able to communicate at least within a couple system together? How do we, honor each other's strengths, opinions, beliefs there? But then also, how do we make decisions from that place too? And very similarly with financial advisors, right? How are we communicating with clients? What does that look like? How are we helping clients communicate with each other if it's a couple or if it's a family system? And then how are we helping clients to make financial decisions, or how do we, guide them through that process? What kind of framework do we offer them there? And so many, I guess, case examples, case, studies there. But more recently, I will say, many of you are probably aware of all of the chaos that is going on with market volatility, stress, anxiety. And there's so many clients who have experienced an increase in anxiety and uncertainty. And, there have been several couples, I will just say more generally speaking, just to keep confidentiality, there have been several couples where there has been a tension point there between what do we do? One partner wants to handle it one way, the other may want to handle it differently. And as the advisor and being myself a part of that team, we come in and help understand what does each side want. So what is all of that there? Because oftentimes I find that it's not just the numbers. That's not what couples are arguing about. There's a lot of, I know, stats and like research that say money is one of like the number one arguments. Um,
Mhm.
I don't agree with that. And that's from 10 plus years in working in couples therapy. Couples aren't fighting about money. They're not fighting about numbers, but they are fighting about the meaning of money and what it means to them. And so if we can come in as an advisory team and understand what is that meaning that's going on here. So if one partner is really, really freaked out around what's going on and, wants to put everything like in cash, like how can we understand what the meaning is behind that or that fear and what is really going on below the waters? And how can we bring that to the surface simultaneously understanding the other partner? And then as a team, how do we help them make a decision? So, okay, if this is where we are, one partner is really scared and fearful, the other is feeling maybe a bit more, I don't know, balanced, logical, has a better understanding, right, of how things work. How can we help them then as a team make a decision around what to do? And how can we break things down to where both sides feel like they're, I don't want to say winning, but at least they feel okay enough, right?
Have you ever written an annuity case and it took not only days, maybe weeks or months to get the funds transferred from another insurance carrier? That is one of the biggest pains in our industry, and we may have a solution for you with a particular carrier. Remember North American, the company that is 139 years old and holds an A plus rating with AM Best, S&P, and Fitch. Also, the carrier that has the Secure Horizon suite of FIAs, which was awarded Deal of the Year in 2024 by SRP Americas. Oh yeah, that company. Well, they now have a cutting edge technology that is paperless and just made business a lot more simple around transfers and 1035 exchanges. This process goes a little like this. If they request a 1035 exchange from another carrier within 24 to 48 hours, that carrier through the DTCC platform must process that request and feed those funds digitally to North American. You heard that right. No more having to hear from the transfer company, we didn't get the paperwork, or we're in the process of manually entering that request, and also no more conservation efforts. So, what does that mean for you as a writing advisor or agent? First of all, no more headaches because of emails or calls back and forth with the carriers. And more importantly, business gets issued faster, and that means you get paid commissions that much quicker. If you're interested in finding out which carriers are currently participating and which ones will be following soon, go to www.insuremarkamp.com/Jeremy and click on Learn More. And I mean, I love the term and phrase framework, because that's where right now, especially going into this year, a lot of the groups that listen to this and work with us, they're doing a lot over processes and figuring out their framework of communication to new prospect, communication with current clients, how to stay in front of them consistently with the right messaging, what to do in between appointments with a new prospect to make sure that they're communicating, maybe not over communicating. So you touched on this a little earlier. So you guys help, your team actually helps advisors with that process, and then also the framework of appointments, or how, or talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so we help with the client journey experience. So from prospect to ongoing maintenance, relationships. What does that journey look like? What are the touch points within that journey? And for those who have an interest in implementing psychological elements, I will say financial psychology, even from like a basic of like what questions are we asking in our
Mhm.
prospect meeting that are collaborating, with clients, inviting them in. We look at all of that and make adjustments, improvements, as well. So, from a process standpoint, it's not start to finish, but it is start to, present, ongoing.
Which, I mean, it could also, and the importance of probably writing stuff down, having it actually written out instead of just winging appointments. Is that something you've probably helped the teams that you've started to come on board with?
Yes. So creating consistency, right, across the board. So let's just take, I'll say prospect meeting is probably the easiest one to go with here. But within our prospect meeting, what are the literal questions that we are asking? And I want to give room for flexibility for individuality here, obviously, but creating a consistent experience so that every single client that's coming in, right, we know across the board, this is the information that we are capturing. This is the experience that we want the client to walk away from. And this is the message that we are trying to deliver. So, yes, Jeremy, scripting, writing and scripting things out, having it on hand, I think is incredibly important.
Yeah, and I mean, so many entrepreneurs and people in sales, so financial advisors, don't like to admit it, but they are in sales, even though they basically are doing more relationship gathering throughout their sales journey. How do you help an advisor more so instead of being just logical, especially a male dominant industry? There's a lot of women that obviously have good success in the financial industry, but especially for the men that are very logical, how do you help them become a little more emotional with their language and emotional with getting down to helping customers more solve a problem that they have?
First, truthfully, like it starts with just the mindset that we are not either or from a logic, we're not either logical or emotional. And this comes out of working with in couples therapy. A lot of men, I will say stereotypically, telling me, oh, I'm not emotional. I'm not very emotional. Um,
Mhm.
And, jokingly, my response would always be like, well, you are because you're human. And last time I checked, you're human. But some of it really starts with if that is a struggle, no matter, male or female, but if that is a struggle where
Mhm.
you view yourself from this dichotomous place, right? Either or, it's really leaning into I am not either or, I am both and, right? I am both logical and I am emotional. The logic muscle might be a lot stronger than the emotional muscle. The other part of that is learning, understanding, and believing that using emotional skills, emotional intelligence skills, if you want to call it that, it's a strategy. And it is going back to some of the things I talked about around being able to observe body language. That is a strategy. It is also an emotional intelligence skill, but it is a strategy for being able to build rapport and to have a successful relationship professionally and also personally. That's what's actually cool about a lot of this is that increasing some of that emotional intelligence, those emotional skills, leaning into that, like killing two birds with one stone. Like it's going to benefit you in your business and it's going to benefit you in your personal life as well. But you have to be able to see that as a strategy for success first and foremost.
Mhm.
And then, beyond that, after that, it's learning and practicing. You've got to go and learn the skills and you have to practice it. You cannot just say, okay, well, I'm going to learn everything there is about body language. And I know I'm going off of that for an example, but I'm going to learn everything that there is about body language. And that might be fine. And that might be all well and good. But if you're not putting that then to practice, um, it, you know, a lot, if you're not building those reps, it really then it's, a skill that's going to go unused. Several kind of points I know that I made there, right? First, understanding that you are emotional, accepting that for some, that might be the hardest part, that you
Mhm.
are an emotional being. Then, from there, understanding and utilizing emotion as a strategy, and then deciding which skills you're going to learn and practicing them.
Looking for growth, security, and flexibility? Ibexus's FIA Plus delivers it all with industry-leading rates, including an annual point-to-point cap up to 20.25%, plus a premium bonus up to 16%. FIA Plus is built for performance. Get added peace of mind with a bailout feature and position confidently with their automated pre-sale suitability tool. Unlock built-in flexibility to pursue even greater growth potential tailored to your client's risk tolerance. Revisit and refine the strategy annually with no added cost. Backed by an A- AM Best rating and offering strong compensation, FIA Plus is your go-to accumulation solution. Ibexus FIA Plus, build to perform, backed by strength. Out of curiosity, and maybe some of the firms you work with don't do this yet, or maybe they do. Are any of them doing a virtual appointment with clients and prospects? So, meaning it's not just in person, but they're actually just doing like a Zoom conversation with them. How can you have you experienced any of that yet, or just out of curiosity?
Yeah, actually, it's funny. All of the firms that I work for, they are all virtually based. Some may do some in person, but
Hmm.
primarily they are, I would say, either all virtual or mostly virtual.
And would you say it's easier or harder to get a better read as a advisor trying to do an emotional connection with somebody on the screen as opposed to in person, or is it more complicated?
I don't know if I would say that it is easier or harder. I think it requires some different strategies.
Hmm.
For me personally, I prefer in person. That also comes from 15 plus years of doing in person therapy and being trained
Hmm.
that way. That is where I grew very comfortable transitioning over into now for myself, primarily all virtual. I have had to learn some different strategies for being able to pick up on cues. It's a little bit more difficult for me to, I know this might sound kind of woo woo, but it's a little bit more difficult for me to feel someone's energy
Hmm.
through a screen. And I'm having to learn other ways of going about and capturing some of the emotional data that I need. So it is possible, but there are some nuanced differences there that can be learned. And from there, then it's just practicing.
What was probably the hardest thing to get used to? Because a lot of the professionals that are listening, they've done up until about 5, 6 years ago or so, a lot of everything they knew is in person. And now everybody's becoming a little more efficient and open to doing virtual. So what was one thing that for Ashley and then for advisors that you coach is something that could help them out with getting the same type of impact in a virtual setting as opposed to what they were doing and feel right at home as if they were in a in-person appointment?
Yeah, the hardest thing is that I can't see your whole body. Like,
Hmm.
I mean, like that's just kind of like for me, it's like, I can't see right now, Jeremy, what you're doing with your hands, what your legs are doing.
Hmm.
And, there are, this might sound kind of weird, but though there's a lot of indicators there that would communicate to me what is going on inside of Jeremy, right? It's things like your legs shaking, right? Or fidgeting.
Hmm.
Those are signs and cues that I used to be able to pick up on in person. I really can't do that anymore. And so some of the skill transition then has been for me, but also what I try and teach is looking at facial expressions. And so understanding even just very small, like minute changes in facial expressions, how can we decode those and use that data and information to, tell us then what might this person be thinking and or feeling in this moment? Do I need to pay attention to this? Do I need to come back to it? So that's just one example. That's probably the biggest for me personally, but then also in coaching as well.
I mean, I can only imagine it'd have to be, which is great advice, what you just talked about there, because it's so true. If you can only see what they allow you to see, I mean, I guess eyes would be the best thing. Or would you even for for those, and it's pretty challenging, but sometimes they don't even turn on their camera. So maybe from the therapist side of things, why would somebody, if they have the opportunity to turn on their camera, what should an advisor think, or should they even host a meeting with a new prospect that refuses to turn the camera on? Is that kind of just a selling sign of saying like I'm closed off?
Yeah, so closed off, yeah, I think that that could be a good indicator. My question would be, what is difficult about that? Are there any barriers in place? Um, it's since doing virtual, it's actually been amazing and kind of shocking some of the reasons that I find that clients, or others will give to not wanting to turn their video on.
Hmm.
Um, and some of it might be that someone's really self-conscious about how they look.
Sure.
They're, we joke that in, kind of the virtual meetings now today, like we're professional from like the top up, but we're in sweatpants, right?
Hmm.
The bottom half is not very professional. But some people are a little bit more self-conscious about the way that they look. And so if they know like this is a professional type of engagement and I'm not feeling like I look my best, I may not want to turn my video on. I I will have a tendency to just ask, hey, my preference is that you turn on your video because it's how I can, you know, see your beautiful face and I can make a connection and, I can read your body language and you get to see and then feel me there. And I'm hearing that that's really difficult for you right now. Can you help me understand what is it about turning on the video that's difficult? How can I make that more comfortable for you? They may or may not oblige you in turning it on, but at least you've asked and you've communicated, hey, I care about, I care about you, not just that you are doing what I want you to do.
Well, I mean, language matters. So that was actually really good because I know for some individuals to do a lot of webinar marketing or talking to people in multiple states, not necessarily in their own backyard, that is an objection that they get a lot. So actually, those are really good advice on ways to have the conversation. And obviously, if they're willing to uh, turn the camera on, although they didn't want to at the beginning, you're moving in the right direction. To say the
Very
least.
true. Very
Are,
true.
so for the firms that you work with, though, can you share a little bit about your process and how that works? So, what I guess the years that you've been doing this now with some of the teams, do you work with pretty large teams, small teams, or what's more of your ideal, I guess, target market for advisors that you found that your systems work relatively well for?
Yeah, so there's two different approaches here. One, I do more project based, I would say, work. And so those are generally like one time engagements where I come in, and those projects tend to center more around the processes. So, doing kind of a process audit, offering feedback, offering changes and suggestions there, and creating, any kind of either client facing deliverables, what have you. So, there are those project based works that I do for firms. Those tend to be more of your, kind of more mid sized, a little bit larger on the larger end. There's the other side where I operate as a financial behavior officer, and it ranges from, very small firm size to, I would say, more mid-size, kind of large size there. And, that is a more, I say, fully integrated role. Like I'm a team member within the practice. And so it's an intimate relationship that gets created there where I get to know you, the team, and your clients. And it's all encompassing. So client facing, advisor facing processes, all of that. So two really kind of types of offerings there. One is, one time, and the other is an ongoing, fully immersed relationship.
So how are advisors that you're working with, how do they introduce you to clients, or how does that work? So,
Mm.
yeah, like how do they introduce you? But then also, what has, based off of their feedback to you, what has worked the best for them?
Yeah. So we do not introduce me as a therapist.
Right.
I've learned
It's
that
like saying the word annuity, but yes.
yeah. So I have learned that. um, but the language that we use with introduction is financial behavior specialist. So I am a certified financial behavior specialist. That is what I lead with. And we'll also share with clients that I do have a mental health background. And what I have found is that introducing myself in that way, one, it communicates to clients that I'm not an advisor. I'm not here to do and understand the numbers aspect of things. But I do have a particular skill set and knowledge base around financial decision making, mental health, relationships, all of that. And I have watched countless times clients go, oh, and like kind of take that sigh of like relief of like, oh, okay, I can talk to you about why making this decision is incredibly difficult and why, growing up watching my parents do this and mess up royally. And here I am years later and eerily in maybe a similar situation. I'm really scared that I'm going to screw this up for whatever reason. Sometimes clients don't always feel like they can talk to their advisor about all of that and share all of that. And when I come into the picture, I'll knock on wood. I've not experienced at least a situation so far where a client has not at least appreciated the knowledge base or the background that I've brought to the table that is complementary to what the advisor is offering.
Great stuff. Where do advisors find you, or how do they locate information on your team?
Yeah, so I'm pretty findable if you type in Ashley Quamme. There are not a lot of Ashley Quammes out there in the world, just in general, but I hang out on LinkedIn a lot. My website is beyondthefp.com. You can check out information there. And I also have a podcast, Planning and Beyond, which brings together experts in the industry around financial planning and financial psychology and equipping advisors with tools, resources, and strategies for being able to implement the human side of money.
The human mind just fascinates me. So I love talking to people like you. As we're wrapping up, is there any words of wisdom or last things you'd like to leave the audience with as we're closing out here?
Yeah, the only thing I would probably say is for those that are listening that have not done any, I'll say self-discovery type work, but have not done any work around understanding their own beliefs and attitudes around money. I would really encourage and maybe challenge you to put that on your to-do list, maybe third quarter, maybe fourth quarter, maybe tomorrow. And the reason why I say that is not because I'm this woo-woo therapist and I think, we should all do that. I mean, yeah, that's part of it. But I have seen tremendous strides and growth in advisors who put in the work to understanding themselves and how that may translate into the advice that they're giving their clients.
Love that. Thank you. Thank you so much, Ashley, for great insight here. And make sure to the listener, check her out. So beyondthefp.com, correct, is the website?
Yep, you got it. You got it.
Awesome. So thank you for your time, Ashley. And thank you also to the listener for tuning in. Make sure to subscribe to the Advisor Mentorship Podcast on your favorite listening device so you do not miss out on any future episodes. And also connect with us on LinkedIn at Jeremy Hauser and subscribe to our YouTube channel at Jeremy Hauser AMP. And as you share this episode with a friend or a colleague, remember, in a world full of betas, be an alpha.